Week 13 is officially here, and today I got you guys covered with my top 10 waiver pickups entering this week of fantasy football. It is crunch time. No more time to waste. 2 regular season games left to determine whether you're going to the dance or whether you'll be watching from home. And guess what? I know which side I'd rather be on. Let's secure those playoff spots and let's get active on the waiver wire. I usually go through the should be roster tier, but at this point in the year, these guys should already be on your rosters at this point. So we'll go straight to the top 10 pickups. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below. But wasting no more time, let's go straight to pickup number 1, and that is Gus Edwards, running back of the Los Angeles Chargers. A guy I'd be willing to spend 10 to 15% of my fab on at this point. And for reference, for those of you that are curious about the fab, the first 4 names on this list, I'd be willing to spend 10 to 15% on. The next 6 names, I'd be willing to spend 5 to 10% on. So the way I view it is the top 4 are in the top tier, and then the other 6 kind of figure behind them. But with Gus Edwards, I get it. He's been inefficient. He had an inefficient game against Baltimore, 9 carries for 11 yards. Didn't really look the greatest in the game. However, he has been getting usage. 25 touches in his last 3 games. And the big elephant in the room on Monday night is J.K. Dobbins leaving in the second quarter with what appeared to be a knee injury. If Dobbins were to miss time in this high-powered Chargers offense, we can be projecting Gus Edwards for a top 25-ish level running back role. Again, we don't really know the full circumstances of the Dobbins injury at this point, but apparently he was spotted at the game with a knee brace on. It does sound like it could be an issue, and again, monitor the status. If something comes out later today that says J.K. Dobbins is week to week or J.K. Dobbins is day to day, really monitor that report. But for the time being, with how this offense has been playing, with how Justin Herbert himself has been playing, Gus Edwards' role is going to be very valuable. And even if he's only giving you 75% of what Dobbins was doing, he is going to be a high-end running back 3 in fantasy, making him an extremely valuable pickup should Dobbins miss time. But we move on to number 2 here, and that's going to be Ameer Abdullah, running back of the Las Vegas Raiders. We did see him work in that standalone role this week, and we saw it at full display. 89% of the snaps, 57% of the rushing attempts, 80% of the routes for the Vegas Raiders this week. The one elephant in the room, I would say as well, is that we don't exactly know the status of Alexander Mattison. We don't know the status of Zamir White. However, with how Ameer Abdullah played, 17 plus PPR points against Denver, we know he has a receiving role on this team. Should either of these backs miss time again, I think Ameer Abdullah is a startable option. B, if both of these backs are out again, like a guy like Gus Edwards, I think Ameer Abdullah becomes a top 24 level running back play. So at this point, with no real knowledge about when Mattison or Zamir White are going to come back, I do trust Ameer Abdullah. Again, I'm not going to go overboard. I'm not going to spend all of my fab budget because there is risk if he will end up getting the work or not. However, like we saw this week, if there's an opportunity down the stretch where Ameer Abdullah is the main running back 1, we can start him with confidence. But moving on to the 3rd running back, in a similar premise to these top 3 running backs here, but Jeremy Mcnichols, like Gus Edwards, like Ameer Abdullah, if the starter ahead of him were to miss time, we know he has value in fantasy football. And specifically for the Washington situation, it may very well be a situation where the top 2 running backs are going to be down this week. Brian Robinson, we do see a report here from Dan Quinn in terms of his overall thoughts on the players. With Austin Eckler, he will be in the concussion protocol. It's his 2nd concussion of the year, and the Commanders will be cautious with him. And we also see with Brian Robinson, again, he injured his ankle, ended up returning with it spatted up later on. It does appear that the x-ray came back negative, but he does say we'll see how much work he does during the week. So I'll have a better sense for you as we get further along. So not really committal as to just exactly what the status is of Brian Robinson, but it does sound like they will be cautious with Austin Eckler. And we've seen Jerry Mcnichols at points this year looked good, looked efficient. And if either of these backs were to be out for this upcoming week, I think he could profile as a top 30 to 36 level running back. And should both of these running backs be out, I think he profiles as a top 25 back. So very similar to Ameer Abdullah in terms of it's very ambiguous as to the status of the 2 backs ahead of him. However, I do think Mcnichols does have upside. Moving on to number 4, and the first wide receiver of this video, we have Devaughn Vele of the Denver Broncos. He is a day 3 guy, but as of late, he has been working ahead of the earlier drafted Troy Franklin, and he has the opportunity to establish himself as the number 2 target for Bo Nix moving forward. Vele brings that size. He's got good, reliable hands, and Sean Payton himself has already compared him to Marcus Colston. If you If you guys are younger football fans, unfamiliar with Marcus Colston, undrafted free agent, I believe, out of Hofstra, no real expectations in his NFL career, and then he quietly ended up being one of the very best wide receivers of his era, 1,000-yard perennial receiver. The fact that Sean Payton is comparing Devaughn Vele to him is very encouraging. Again, I'm not going to go out there and say Devaughn Vele, yeah, he's automatically going to be the next Marcus Colston. Very unlikely that ends up materializing. But what it does tell me is that, as we see here in our staff meeting 20 minutes ago, I said we got to continue to find touches for him. If Sean Payton trusts him, if Sean Payton's already comparing him to Marcus Colston, who, by the way, has a similar type of stature, Devaughn Vele, 6'5", 210, kind of built like Marcus Colston in the past. I'm not saying, like I said, he's going to be Marcus Colston, but if he's going to be more involved moving forward, we saw him command 9 targets this week. We saw him play some efficient football, and I think by these comments alone, he will be a staple for this offense. Number 5 is Adonai Mitchell of the Indianapolis Colts, and he is only really an upside stash at this current point. Like, I would feel very hesitant to put him into my lineup. However, we have seen the recent news that Josh Downs is considered week to week, and Adonai Mitchell, anytime he's been on the field, has flashed significant upside for this Colts offense. 27% targets per route run rate when he's on the field. And if Vele is, the safe play of this wire, I would say Adonai Mitchell is the upside play. The moment he gets that full-time role, I think he has top 25 level fantasy football upside. But unfortunately for AD, the overall projection is murky because of what he's been used as. However, with Josh Downs out, if he becomes a 70+% snap share player, I think Adonai Mitchell will rise down the stretch. He only comes in at 5 because we're not exactly sure of the role, but he has the upside to be an all-your-fab level acquisition. But moving on to number 6, we have Dontayvion Wicks, who's a very similar play to Adonai Mitchell in the sense that when he's on the field, he is commanding targets. 26% targets per route run rate when he's on the field, 35% of the team end zone targets. The problem is that he's only played 50% of the routes this year. Now you enter the situation with Romeo Doubs, very scary concussion. The team does play on Thursday. It's gutty, I understand, but if you're really desperate and you needed to throw Wicks into your lineup, I don't think he's the worst play this week. Yes, it's volatile. Yes, we've seen him be overseeded by other receivers in this room based off overall snap share in this offense. But when he's on the field, it's clear that Jordan Love trusts him, and it's clear that Jordan Love wants to get him the football. So risky. I would prefer 80 straight up of these stashes, but it's hard not to see the upside given what we've seen in terms of spike weeks in the last couple of years for Dontayvion Wicks. But number 7, and leaning off of the upside, Adonai Mitchell, Dontayvion Wicks style wide receiver, we go back similar to a guy like Devaughn Vele, a guy that you can plug into your lineup each and every week, especially through bye weeks, especially through injuries. I'm really liking Westbrook-Ikhine of the Tennessee Titans, and I get it. He is very touchdown dependent, touchdowns in 5 of his last 6 games, but I'm very encouraged by the overall usage he's been seeing. Have the targets been consistently there? No. However, 92%, 97%, 100%, 85%, and 90% of the snaps in each of the last 5 weeks. Since this team traded DeAndre Hopkins away, he's become a full-time player, and we know he brings a big play element to this offense. So I get it. He is volatile, but I do think at this point he needs to be considered a pinch wide receiver 4 start. But coming in at number 8, we have Elijah Moore of the Cleveland Browns, and he profiles similarly to a guy like Devaughn Vele, to a guy like Westbrook-Ikhine, rather than the Adonai Mitchell, Dontayvion Wicks upside stashes. But I really do think in a full PPR league, Elijah Moore should be rostered at this point, only rostered in 24% of leagues. I think he has the opportunity to play a Wan'Dale Robinson-esque role for this Browns offense. And with Tillman suffering a concussion on Thursday night, we could see even more volume for Elijah Moore this week. Jameis has thrown the ball 40-plus times in 3 of his first 4 starts and threw the ball 27 times last week despite dealing with a big-time storm. So with Elijah Moore, 11.5 PPR points per game since week 8, 22% target share since Jameis took over. And I do think with Tillman potentially out of the lineup, we could see a hyper-target game on Monday Night Football. And then finally coming in at 9 and 10, I'll just group these guys together because they are the same theoretical play here. Trey Benson, 35% rostered. Blake Corum, 20% rostered. And I do prefer Benson, but I did think he'd have an overall bigger standalone role than what we saw this past week. Only 4 touches was disappointing considering the fact he had 21 in the previous 2 games prior to the bye. But anytime he's been getting the ball, he's been one of the more efficient running backs in the league. James Conner still has not finished a full healthy season in his career. And if Trey Benson were to get the starting role in the fantasy playoffs, he is the type of player that can completely flip matchups on their head. If there's an opportunity where you can play him in your lineup in the fantasy playoffs, he will be ranked as a top 15 level running back in my rankings. Again, I don't trust either of these guys from a standalone perspective. However, should Connor or Kyron Williams go down in their respective backfields, each of them have the opportunity to be the skeleton key you need to win your fantasy football championship. So at this point, the fact that they're not rostered for Blake Corum's sake in 80% of leagues, for Trey Benson's sake in 65% of the leagues, that needs to change, especially at this point. Who cares about the wide receiver 6 you have on your team? Who cares about the Alexander Madison you have on your team? You trade off those players for players that can absolutely dictate matchups. Take chances on guys that can change the complexion of your entire league. But either way, if you guys enjoyed, make sure you leave a like down below. Comment your biggest waiver wire decisions. I'll try to get to as many as possible. And of course, if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. We are on the road to 60,000 subscribers. Appreciate you guys for that continued support. Also, if you guys want access to all of our weekly rankings moving forward, we are entering the fantasy football playoffs. The weekly rankings manifesto is your #1 resource to taking down that crown. 2 ways to access it right now. First way, Underdog Fantasy, promo code FSE. Sign up and first deposit at least $10. You make 1 play on the site. You will have access to that weekly rankings manifesto. The other way is by going over to flockfantasy.com. By using promo code FSE, you will get 30% off any site-wide package, as well as a 7-day free trial on the site. But with that being said, peace out. Get active on the wire. Good luck with those transactions, baby.